paycheck, and a steady stream of beautiful women moving through his condo's revolving lobby door. So yeah, he used the sexy, single chef persona to his advantage to help make a name for himself. He worked hard and played hard, and damn, those earlier years had been a lot of fun. But something changed. For a while, he dismissed it as being in a brief lull. However, as the months went by, he started to realize he was idling, doing the same old thing, living in the same old life. And that feeling sucked. He wanted more than the fast lane he'd accelerated on for so long. When he came home for the holidays and saw that all his friends had settled down and were now having kids, he started to question his carefree, playboy existence. He'd been on the single career track for so long that he'd forgotten to stop and pick up a wife and kids along the way. Convinced he was missing out, he decided to slide into the conductor's seat and take charge of his life. The plan was to sell his portion of the restaurant to Mark and open up a new one in Buttermilk Falls. A new start, a clean slate. While opening his next restaurant, he'd also make finding a Mrs. Foster an equal priority. Simple. Yeah, not so much. His plan started out well. Mark accepted the offer to buy him out. That gave Donovan a substantial sum to turn around and open a restaurant in Buttermilk Falls. The paperwork to sell his portion was whipped up within days, and Donovan had packed up his belongings, put his condo on the market, and moved home shortly after the ink was dry. But then the problems began. The first being he was having a hard time finding a place for his new restaurant. Adam's girlfriend, Bethany Wilson, had snagged the last vacant space along the small town's main street, which probably wouldn't have worked for him anyway unless he wanted to open up a small coffee shop. He thought he could take Brandon's lead and open a restaurant on Buttermilk Lake, and had cruised the lake's perimeter more than a dozen times with no luck. He had yet to find a vacant space that could easily be converted into a restaurant. Even if he found a place, there was another much bigger issue. He had no clue what kind of establishment he wanted to open. He'd always prided himself on modern fusion cuisine, but the truth was he'd gotten bored of the dishes he was known for and his techniques. The thought of opening the same type of restaurant, doing the same thing, made his stomach ache. He'd begun to face the facts. He'd lost the spark that had always ignited his drive and guided his entire culinary career. And then there was the plan to settle down. Well, it only took a week back to realize most of the women he'd crushed on, Abby, Caitlin, Bethany, to name a few, were all taken. His prospects for finding a wife were about as slim as finding a vacant spot to open a new eating establishment. So, here he was 2 months later, with no restaurant and no woman. He glanced down at his discarded apron. At least he had a job to keep him busy. Last month, he stopped into the Sugar Spoon Bakery for a sweet treat, where an exasperated Abby offered him work right on the spot. She'd been running the place while her cousin and owner, Emma Stevens, was out of town. He'd gotten his start as a pastry chef, so whipping up dessert at the Sugar Spoon wasn't a bad gig while he was in limbo. Not to mention it got him back in the kitchen. His gaze moved over to Abby, still stirring her cake batter with the shimmering pink wooden spoon. Or plastic. He really couldn't tell. What he was 100% sure of was that pink glitter wouldn't add any flavor to the cake mix and, if swallowed, could provide some serious indigestion. Although no one seemed to complain, and that didn't really surprise him. Even before working here, he'd grown up knowing that the Stevens clan had a little magic running through their fingertips, and the glittery spoon did more than mixing. The whole town knew that Emma took after her mother, Sheila Stevens, and was the experienced Buttermilk Falls witch who, each Monday night, held Batter Up, in which she predicted the soulmate of one lucky bachelor by mixing her name up in cake batter with the glittered pink spoon. Totally nuts, and wasn't something he'd readily shared with any of his buddies in Colorado. Still, he knew it was all legit, having seen Bridget Dobson's name appear in his buddy Tom Reed's batter nearly 2 years ago when he'd been home visiting his family. The couple were now happily married. Since Emma was in Texas for the unforeseeable future, trying to find her estranged father, Abby stepped in for tonight's Batter Up spell, deciding Donovan would be her guinea pig. Okay. Abby's eyelids